All right. Thank you so much, Ambassador, for joining us here at the PuLSE Institute. We are monitoring what is taking place in Ukraine, and it has arrested the world's attention. Kind of want to get your take, though, right away in terms of what you have served as former Lithuanian ambassador to the United States. What would you like Washington to do, and I mean the Joe Biden administration, right now as we speak?
Well, I would say, first of all, or maybe that's the basics from which everything started, to correct the mistake of Bucharest NATO summit. In Bucharest NATO summit, American President Bush with other 7 presidents, including mine, we were fighting for membership action plan for Ukraine to enter NATO. Unfortunately, we were blocked by Germans and French. And now, when we see the cost of this bad decision, also with all experience of the Baltic states, Russia has never been drawing borders. We were drawing borders on the eastern fronts. And if you leave countries in limbo, if you create gray zones, be sure they will be taken, annihilated. People will be killed. And the killings are just barbaric. I was in Bucha myself with a number of parliamentarians 2-3 days ago in Kiev. My prime minister just returned from Borodyanka, another village completely destroyed. No, Russian soldiers are raping kids of 6 years old. This is the level of atrocities. All the women in Bucha are raped, killed. I saw movies about, fascist crimes in Europe, but I didn't see it in my life. And this is happening. This needs to be stopped. So NATO membership would be the best. Of course, it takes time.
Right.
We should also fight for EU membership. And here, American administration could simply informally help us lobby the capitals to do it. But if not, please provide all possible lethal assistance. Until now, we're providing something. Yes, thank you, great. But not the assistance that Ukrainians can recover those occupied territories, where now Russian generals who earned the experience in Syria in mass killings, they're doing those atrocities. So strategic weaponry that can take those planes out of the skies, military jets, I understand, not maybe of NATO quality. We are now pushing our Eastern partners, former Warsaw Pact countries, to give up whatever they have. But also, I think we should consider something that we did in Balkans: corridors, NATO or American or coalition or willing guaranteed corridors to those sites of massacres, to Mariupol, where we think hundreds of thousands, at least tens of thousands, might be already dead or deported. So if we are human, if we have the biggest and most powerful military on this planet, and if we really fight for democracy, so defend those Ukrainians who are dying actually with the signs of Europe or NATO in their hands.
And you believe that war crimes are being committed in Ukraine as we speak?
Well, 100%. We have proof of it. We have videos with people riding bicycles and being killed. We have stories with evidence that, can you imagine, in Bucha, where I was, Russian soldiers, they were giving humanitarian assistance to people underground just to lure them out. When the people were coming out of the underground storages, they were throwing grenades on them. A lot of cases like this. Bucha was like, okay, in Detroit, I don't remember those areas, those nice, wonderful areas around Detroit, but I was there. It's like, it was one of the best areas to live. It was so-called lungs of Kiev, where pine trees are growing, and they just bombed it. The first missile went to Bucha. It was the best civilian building. The plane attacked civilian building. I saw it. It was the first bombing. 3 floors of the building just vanished. We had people there, and soldiers said that the bomb was so strong that they jumped the meter up. So they're bombing them with. Okay, you saw this Kramatorsk railway station. They bombed it with tactical missile 200 kilometers from the site. You know, it is huge. So we have to stop it.
President Putin was, BBC was reporting, calling the war in Ukraine a noble effort. Your take on that, what that means coming from Russia?
Well, I couldn't even think, how can I? Well, first of all, imagine you have Germany after Second World War run by fascist Gaussleiters. You know, it's what happened in Russia. After Soviet Union collapsed, the same killers, KGB, that killed the biggest number of people, at least in Europe, of, you know, the biggest number of Lithuanians, Ukrainians, any free nation, you know, they were running the whole system for 100 years. They are the butchers. They ran Russia and they're running it, but empowered by Western money, by Western markets, by Western technologies. So they are killing and occupying countries in 21st century, violating all possible international agreements, starting from Helsinki 75, United Nations, OSCE, Council of Europe. There is no one treaty that is not violated by this country, and the killings, indiscriminate killings of civilians. Oh yes, this is war crime. And if you cannot maybe read the Russian, but we read Russian. What they mean by denazification of Ukraine? They mean loss of sovereignty, loss of national identity, loss of European direction. They say this is not only Ukrainian leadership and politician, those are big layers of society. For me, it is exactly what Stalin was doing. You know, my grandfather was sent to Kazakhstan, though he was poet and opera dancer and you know, he was elite painter. He spent 14 years in Kazakhstan. He survived. Now they're taking hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians, bringing them somewhere to Russia, keeping them in camps. They're not allowing them to return. What is it? So is it exactly the Gulag system the Russians they were using?
So you think Putin is a modern day Stalin?
Oh my God, he is a modern day Hitler and Stalin. He is a killer. He's a madman. And the mere fact that we've been telling it to the West for 22 years already now, 22 years. And the Western leaders, they were shaking hands, they were investing money to autocratic countries. We were creating interdependencies, stupidly thinking that with economy you can fix China's or Russia's. Oh no, now we wake up not in the world of Huntington, but in the world of, not in the world of Fukuyama, but in the world of Huntington, in the geopolitical world. And all those interdependencies are being used against us, again to divide the world, to restore the empires. Stupid we. Instead of paying, you know, the bills of Russian killers, we better invest countries into free countries, into Taiwan's, into Lithuania's.
Right. At the end of this carnage that is taking place in Ukraine, do you think Putin should be personally tried for war crimes? Should Vladimir Putin be personally tried for war crimes?
100% him, everyone who, you know, who is part of that decision-making system, not only the operators, but those who created this killing machine. And to make it blunt, in a historic sense, what happened with Germany after similar assault on Europe? We denazified them and demilitarized. Interestingly, this is exactly what Putin is asking from Ukraine, because this is like an Orwellian society. They're calling peace, war, and differently, but it's exactly what we have to do with them. We have to de-Putinize Russia, to get rid of that regime, to get rid of that that killing machine of the fascists who are still running Russia, and demilitarize it. For example, if you know the geography, Kaliningrad region, that's a little part of Russia to the west of us. It's like enclave. And, between this Kaliningrad and Belarus, we just have 100 kilometers of border with Poland, with the Baltic states. In all military scenarios, they close it. It's so-called Suwalki Gap. Well, if we demilitarize Kaliningrad, if we demilitarize Russia, if we do not allow them to have weapons like that, because we are kind of sometimes joking, they don't have the Department of Defense or Ministry of Defense. They have Ministry of Assaults only, of military aggression. We have to disarm them, and we have to put them into jail and allow free people like Vladimir Kara-Murza, whose family is now in Washington, D.C., twice poisoned by Putin. He was yesterday arrested. Like Navalny, like all other people who think like us, and allow Russian people to make the choice themselves. Unfortunately, we didn't do it for 22 years. We traded, we sold the freedom in Russia for money. We had very good contracts in Russia. We just were making money out of Russian freedom, and now we have a result.
Mr. Ambassador, here at the PuLSE Institute, we're concerned about the state of inequality, poverty. A United Nations estimate indicated that about 90% or more of the people of Ukraine will be subjected to abject poverty in the next year if this war continues. What is your take on that UN report in terms of what's going to happen economically for the people of Ukraine?
I agree. Well, if you know Latin American societies where we are all complaining that only elite is living well and most of the people are poor, right. So multiply it to I don't know how many times. In Russia, it's about 100 people, 100 rich people owning all the wealth of millions of Russians. They are crazy rich. You, of course, saw those yachtas, and it's unimaginable riches. Like my good old friend, the late Senator McCain, was always repeating to me in Washington, it's like gasoline station run by mafia. So you have that mafia that controls all the wealth. So they first occupy Russia and created this complete poverty, but now this military machine, by entering other countries and occupying the rest of the countries. Okay, let's start from Georgia. In so-called South Ossetia that they occupied, part of Georgia, it's a desert. It's desert. Nothing is there. Nothing is growing. No economy. Just Russian soldiers are drinking a lot of vodkas. Everything is stopped. So the same, of course, is happening in those occupied Donbas, or, well, I'm from Bucha right now. The area of elite Kiev suburb is turned into complete annihilated, I don't know, Solaris. Nothing is there. No water, no electricity, no gas. People are starving there. The same is happening in Donbas. The same is happening in all other systems, because Russians are not able to run economy by themselves. They're able to steal, they're able to kill. The same in Belarus. Country that is to the east of Lithuania, 10 million of people. Look to that. Soviet communist zoo run by dictator Lukashenko, complete puppet of Putin. Oh my God, people in all those territories earn maybe 150 euros a month. When they come and they cross border to Vilnius, that is just 200 kilometers from their capital. Oh my God, they are in complete luxury. And we were poor like them 30 years ago in Soviet Union. You know, when I was kid, I remember in Soviet Union, only once per year we've been receiving bananas, once per year, green bananas. I was like a kid, I was putting them on the window, waiting until they become kind of yellow. Once per year, we've been receiving toilet paper. You know, we are agricultural country. We were agricultural, now we are a bit modern, but we had no meat in, you know, we had no milk. I don't know, we've been eating some crops, something. And now it's exactly what is starting to happen in Russia, because Russia didn't, you know, in Soviet Union, we had some stupid, strange industries who were producing some bad stuff. Now they don't have those industries. Right. It was replaced by Western investments. In case the Western investments is out, you have this old wooden Russian house, they call it izbushka. You know, you saw it in Russian tales. They're living in that little old house with huge weapons, because you have killers, you have barbarians, a lot of time brought to Ukraine from Siberia, from faraway territories, right, just to kill. They're animals.
So millions of people have been displaced already from the war in Ukraine. What should the United Nations and the corresponding international community do to help those victims of war?
Well, first of all, we are hugely disappointed with United Nations. This organization is nothing. It's paralyzed by two criminal regimes, by two deadly criminal systems. Russia and China, they paralyze every move. They saw the war coming. Intelligence was telling about the imminent Russian attack for 5 months, 5 long months. And what was done by United Nations? Nothing. Everything was paralyzed. So my dream, and I learned that dream from the speechwriter of Reagan, Mark Palmer, who was still visiting my embassy in Washington, D.C. I still remember his last toast in my embassy. He said, "Žygis, let's drink to United Nations of democracies. We have to forget those autocracies and killers, you know, who misuse our freedom, who annihilate us in all the countries. We have to create an organization of democracies that would have their own military arm, that would defend democracies." Because when President Biden is saying great speeches in inauguration that democracies have to be defended, so what about Ukraine? Do you know that in the beginning of Soviet Union, this country had more than 50 million people? In the beginning of this war, they had 40 million people. Now they have maybe 30 million people. Okay, 35, and millions are leaving. You know, millions of people who wants to live like Americans or Lithuanians or other free nations, they are being killed and annihilated with Russia and with kind of little Chinese support. And this is the future of the world, how it will look. So either we democracies, we stop it. And okay, you asked the question, what in ideal world we can do. Let's do it what it was done in the Balkans. First of all, let's create NATO or America or coalition of willing guaranteed corridors to those areas of massacres like Mariupol, completely surrounded and annihilated city where even some kind of chemical actor was used yesterday. We are still trying to get the details, maybe Zarin, but knowing what Russians they were doing in Syria, I think something really was used. Create the corridor, guarantee the safety, and get the people out. And if Russians start killing American or Lithuanian soldiers, then retaliate. I see no other way to stop that beast, because that beast is very much afraid of behavior like this, because they know that you are afraid. They know that you are very much afraid to do anything with them, and they proceed. Because of the old communist saying, I will first say it in Russian and then translate. Прощупывать Европу штыками. You more or less, on the gun you have the knife. So you try to feel where are the limits of Europe, and you go into the leg until you meet the bone. They are going, and they will be going. They will be taking country by country until we show the bone.
You said
who is the bone?
You said
we.
You said you're disappointed with the United Nations, but the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has been outspoken on this crisis in Ukraine.
Outspoken, yes. But you know, what words you can say to those dead bodies of thousands of Ukrainians? Words are not enough today. Deeds. Deeds defending the great values of United Nations, because if you look to the Charter of United Nations, oh my God, I could write it even today. It corresponds to my beliefs, to my constitution, but you know what? The system is not working at all. So it's paralyzed.
Do you think the United Nations should be replaced with something else?
I think, first of all, we have to kick the criminal regimes out of the nation, out of the organization that have to preserve the values that are enshrined in United Nations Charter, like we did it with Russia in Human Rights Council in Geneva of United Nations. But we have to kick them from Security Council. Security Council has to be modernized, transformed. We have to accept new countries into that. Yes, a lot of regions are not even part of that council. Africa, Asia, countries like, Japan or Germany, who would have the right and weight to make those decisions. They are not even represented.
Explain to our global audience here at the PuLSE Institute what abject poverty and economic misery waiting to be visited upon the people of Ukraine, what that looks like in Ukraine as we speak.
Well, I would better maybe explain by my own personal life. I faced Soviet tanks. They killed my friends 30 years ago at the TV tower because we were first nation in Soviet Union who said, we need independence. Soviet Union, you occupied us 50 years ago. We need freedom. So Gorbachev sent tanks. He was not convinced of our intentions. So he killed 14 people. And I remember then, at that moment, I decided to become a diplomat, because I will never have tanks like this, but I have my heart, I have my brain, and I will integrate my country into the West. I joined the diplomatic service, and I remember my salary was $5 a month. $5 a month. When I think about it today, I don't know how could I actually survive, but we survived. I had a kid. First son born, we had no water, no gasoline, but we survived. So that was the beauty of Soviet Union. Today, I am earning, I don't know, okay, average Lithuanian is earning much, much, much more than any average Russian, much, much more. Of course, we are now richer than Greeks and Portuguese and Spanish. We are richer than Poles. We're richer than Estonians, so we are more or less 85 or 90% of EU average, and we did it in 30 years. That's the power of free market. That's the power of freedom and democracy, and we did it with our hands, of course, with the help of our brothers in America and everywhere. But it was, it was wonderful result of freedom. When you are enslaved, killed, annihilated, where, first they start with people who are most creative, who are most free. They annihilate the people who can think and fight. They empower the slaves, the criminals. That society cannot live for long. Those experiments will die out. Like Cuban society or this Cuban communist regime will collapse sooner or later. So, but it can survive for decades.
So given this grim economic outlook that the United Nations just has released on Ukraine, how many years back do you think this is taking Ukraine? Is going to take Ukraine?
Look, first of all, it's one of the most fertile land on this planet. It's Russia. Ukrainians are feeding half of Africa, just like this. They are very well educated people, like we, for some strange reasons. Why? Because honestly, the Russian civilization was created in Kiev. Who are Russians? They are, we were not even calling them Russians in medieval age. We were calling them, because, Lithuania has a strange, interesting story of 1,000 years. We were calling them Muscovites. When Mongol Tatar hordes occupied Russia, they stayed in Russia, and we stopped them. Our knights, we stopped together with Poles. We had an empire from Baltic to Black Sea. We stopped them. So they have this Mongol Tatar kind of wartime style, and they will stay like this. And those, Ukrainians are just trying to live in kind of European way.
So Ukraine and Russia provide about 25% of the wheat to the world.
Yes, sorry, I didn't answer your question because I just went to some other direction. Okay, education, great engineering talent. It's one of the best parts of the former Soviet Union. Military industry. Okay, Bayraktars. That Turkish military industry is first of all working on Ukrainian Isles. Oh my God, if we would open the market, European Union market, because we're now trying to get this EU membership perspective for Ukrainians to make them at least EU member if Americans are so weak and they cannot push them into NATO like President Bush pushed the Baltics into NATO. If, history will show what. This country will be one of the wealthiest countries in Europe. I promise to you, in 10 years, it will be the jewel. Because with people like this, you can do anything you want.
But Ukraine's institutions are being decimated. Its infrastructure is being decimated. How can it rise from the ashes in 10 years?
Look. Have you ever visited Lithuania? No. You should. Please, I'm inviting you.
Okay.
If you would see Lithuania 30 years ago, you couldn't even imagine how we looked. It was great Soviet zoo. Nothing was there. Nothing. If you would look to us now, and that was done with big EU funds, money, experts. I was part of negotiating team that brought Lithuania to EU. We divided problems into 31 chapters. Now it's 35 chapters because the world is getting more complicated. We fixed every area. There is no better organization like European Union that fixes you in every area. From social to transport to energy. You took the system, you apply the laws, you create administrative resources, you send experts. And when it started to happen with Lithuania in 99, because only in 99 we started accession talks, my economy started to grow 10% GDP a year. We became Baltic tigers. Oh my God, we started to get salaries, investments, they were coming. And my wonderful, great Cynthia Paskey from Detroit with great company strategic staffing solutions. When she understood one thing well, and she said it to me in Washington, I asked her, Cynthia, how do you manage to bring all those investors to Lithuania? She said, Žygis, look to you, look to Lithuanians. You've been living in a hell. You are the representative of bloodlands. That's an official title of the book of Timothy Snyder. He was thinking, your historian, that people living from Baltic to Black Sea, they are the strongest people on earth because we resist evil for 1,000 years. We know a lot of languages. We know how to reconstruct the world. And when she was bringing big international companies like Barclays, Thermo Fisher Scientific, Western Union from Chicago, she understood that if you bring the company to Lithuania, it starts earning you 4 or 5 times more than the same company operating in London. So this is exactly, you have the same people in Ukraine and even Belarus, though nobody believes that, because we've been part of the same area. I am Lithuanian with Polish and Tatar blood. Can you imagine? I am exactly the result of that empire we had in the Baltic, in the Middle Ages. And we were called the European Union of the Middle Ages. So invest here and you will see the beauty. And the only way is to create the fence to barbaric nation in the East. It means accept Ukraine into EU and NATO. But finally, if Putin loses that war, he's losing his power grip as well. So it will be, it's now the beginning of the end of Putin regime. You can look to those words maybe after 2-3 years to this video, and we will see who is right, who is not. But I think Putin regime will collapse. It will not turn so well like in Ukraine, because in Ukraine you have civil society, you have every element built for freedom. In Russia, it will take another generation maybe, but Putin regime will collapse, I promise.
2 more questions for you, Ambassador, and that is, there's some concerns that what is happening in Ukraine is only going to increase global poverty, given these numbers that the UN has released. And that obviously should be worrying to anybody who's watching on the global stage what is happening when we look at the fact that when you look at the history of wars, it's normally women and children who are normally the victims of war and conflict around the world. How do you feel from where you sit as a member of the Lithuanian Parliament, member of the Foreign Relations Committee, but also former Lithuanian ambassador to the United States? The fact that you now look at Ukraine, a nation that borders Lithuania and Poland, now becoming a factor, or at least this fear that it could be a factor to increase global poverty.
Yesterday I was in Warsaw with my speaker, and we went to a very powerful place, to the Museum of Holocaust, that is built in the center of former ghetto in Warsaw. That was completely annihilated after resistance, where Jews were trying to escape the Nazis. Of course, they failed and they were annihilated. So I will symbolically say like this: if we do not stop Putin, Europe sooner or later will look like this destroyed ghetto, because we have the same Nazis with another title, but symbol is interestingly similar, with Z coming, who annihilate any kind of difference, any kind of free mentality, any kind of creativity. So if we do not stop them, and remember that Putin is empowered by China, China is now watching the game. If Putin wins the game, China will restore this kind of despotism on half of the globe. We will be living again in Cold War scenarios with democracies fighting autocracies on a global scene. But if we stop Putin, I don't think that China will move their tanks and rockets on Taiwan. I think they will also learn the lesson. And we will create one of the most powerful economies in Europe, and it will make a huge historic impact on Russia. Sooner or later, Russia will transform, and all those enslaved Russians for more than 100 years, they will become much more rich, much more free, much more similar to us. And we will have just one country remaining, China, who will still confront us, but they will not do it so ugly like Russia is doing it today. And maybe they will think twice before doing it the same that Russia does. Maybe we will be able to deal with them in the future. But if we lose that war, China will continue. And it will be finally Europe annihilated by those regimes, because primary aim of Russia and China is to cut Europe from Americans, to make that divide, to leave you alone, to isolate you in your wonderful isolated country, especially with leaders like Trump and others who are isolationists. And if we'll be dreaming about that and shaking hands of a lot of autocratic leaders. So they will first kill your weaker allies, your weaker friends like us, and then they will deal with you.
Since you mentioned Trump, do you believe that the U.S. response to Ukraine would have been radically different if Trump was president?
Well, I usually try to stay bipartisan, and I will say why. I will be very honest.
You mentioned Trump as an isolationist. That's why I actually.
Yeah, but you know what? I was sent like ambassador to Washington in 2010, when President Obama started his administration with reset of relations with Russia. I was shocked, because Russia just occupied parts of Georgia. How can you embrace a dictator? And with late already Secretary Albright, who was one of the first to come to my embassy and said, Žygis, let's do something that Obama administration would actually install letter D, democracy, into the policy. We worked hard. It finally happened only in 2013 with Hillary Clinton, after finally Ukraine was occupied. Why I'm telling it? Isolationist tendencies in America are on the left and right. I would love to have Democrats and Republicans think internationally, because you are, well, with all your problems, and you have a lot of problems, you are the strongest democracy on the globe. You are the natural leader of us. Yes, you have Lithuanian experience, you have Lithuanian wisdom, you have already Lithuanian wealth, but we need you to unite first of all, and then expand and defend democracies of that globe. That's why I still think that the dream of Mark Palmer is great. United Nations of Democracy. Let's join and militarily defend Taiwan. Let's never ever allow Chinese and Russians destroy the beauty of freedom, because people like you and me, we would be in gulags.
All right.
I hate that. I don't think that this is right.
Yeah. Just two quick final questions here before we wrap this conversation up. Ukraine, you think Ukraine is headed towards a Marshall Plan?
Yes, and I don't know, on the same train that, I was on the train to Kiev, and we traveled together with President of the Commission, von der Leyen, as well as another EU leader. We not even promise, we have the money to reconstruct Ukraine, sorry. Of course, we don't know the whole scale of the operation to be done, because Russians are still destroying the country. But I'm completely sure that with the help of European Union and its partners in America, in Canada, in United Kingdom, in Australia, because finally look to the voting at United Nations. Whose are Russia's partners? Okay, China, Syria, Belarus, Cuba. You know, we are still, well, from 50 to 60 to 70% of the economy in this world. We can fix country like Ukraine, who are fighting for values. And maybe last thing on Ukraine, some people were complaining, and they were right, that we had before the war quite a big level of corruption in the country. And I asked that question of the soldier who was accompanying me to those places of massacre. I asked, what about those oligarchs? Where are they? He said, Žygis, they left the country. They're not fighting. We, the people, fighting. And with the leadership of great President Zelensky, who for me is like Churchill of today, honestly, he said that every man that will leave Ukraine now, when we are at war, until the age of 60, they will never return. And I think he's right. You know, the war is like black and white possibility for you to show who are you. And all those thieves and oligarchs who left the country, I hope they will really never return, because this war is being fought by brave, great, poor Europeans who want to live like us, and they deserve that freedom.
Finally, if you're sitting across the table from President Joe Biden right now, what would you tell him about this crisis in Ukraine?
Well, I just told it to one of the best friends, his former national security advisor when he was vice president, Mike Carpenter, who is my friend. He's now ambassador in Vienna. I told him, Mike, I know that you have a possibility to see President Biden. Tell him one thing. His speeches, his values are great. When I heard this inauguration speech, I more or less cried. But it's now time to turn it into reality. And he could be the most respected American president, like we respect President Reagan, who said communism should die. It's the evil empire. He could enter into the history like the president who really created Europe whole and free. The old dream of all American presidents, of European popes and European leaders, President Havel and others, Europe whole and free and at peace. It is not at peace, it is at war. It's being turned. But Biden, if he helps Ukrainians to win that war, he will change Europe beyond recognition. And finally, great American nation will have strong, great, and very similar friends that will help America to deal with all problems of the world. In Africa, in Asia, with China, to rebuild that trust. Because finally, I really believe in those values of United Nations. Every human is born free, and we have to do everything that every human has this freedom, enjoyed, that no autocracy is taking that freedom from any human on this globe. But we have to start making it, because if not, we are already, according to Freedom House, only 15% of this of humans on that globe, counting per capita, not by state, we are completely free. And freedom is shrinking for last 15 or 16 years. If Biden does nothing, if we have some isolationist or even autocratic president winning American presidential elections, the end of this story. I was born and I graduated the university and international relations with the beginning of great end of history of Fukuyama, and I think I will finish my life then with complete end of Fukuyama era and us turning into complete Orwellian world, when you can say nothing about poverty, nothing about justice, nothing about humanity. We will all be imprisoned by 1% of ugly dictators. The end of the story. So Biden can make this world much, much better. He could become historic president of global democracy that turns it into reality. He could finish the conquest that Reagan started.
All right. Thank you so much, Ambassador, for talking to us here at the PuLSE Institute. Thank you again.
Thank you. Goodbye.
All right. Okay.